Hi, I'm Sharon Davis, Chief Executive of Young Enterprise, and welcome to Series 3 of Enterprising Mindsets, Minding Your Money. We'll be exploring the often overlooked role mindset plays in building financial capability and the benefits to be gained from understanding the impact our attitudes, beliefs and values have on our behaviours around money. I'm hoping we'll discover new ways to help young people build a money-related mindset and also to explore the contribution this could have in increasing social mobility in the future. My guest today is Paul Feeney, Chief Executive of Quilter, which is a leading provider of advice, investments and wealth management in the UK. Paul's a highly experienced entrepreneurial leader, having held various senior business roles in large international financial services businesses, including as Chief Exec of NatWest Private Bank and NatWest Investments USA Group Managing Director. Paul is chair of the Quilter Foundation that has a mission to help young people overcome barriers to prosperity as a key part of Quilter's shared prosperity plan. And Paul is passionate about promoting an open discussion on mental health, both across the industry and at Quilter, where he has sponsored the Thrive campaign to support colleagues, including those impacted by the pandemic. And we'll talk about that campaign later. I spoke to Paul earlier today on Zoom. Paul, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to Minding Your Money.
Delighted to be here.
Paul, I'm really looking forward to us chatting about the work you do at Quilter and the foundation to support young people. And I'm really interested in your take on how financial services organisations like Quilter can help change the narrative around financial education and show it as an enabler of opportunity and prosperity, rather than perhaps having a sole focus on reducing debt or exploitation. So lots to talk about. But before we do that, I'd love the chance for listeners to get to know you a little, if I may. We know mindset's often informed by our early experiences of the world. Research says that money habits and behaviours often stick with us for life, and they're formed by the age of 7. So my first question, Paul, taking you back to growing up in Manchester, who and what were your early memorable influences that informed your attitude and mindset around money?
I did grow up in Manchester. I would have to say my mum and my grandmum were my biggest influence, probably my biggest influences in all my life growing up, but certainly around this too. My parents divorced when I was very young, and I lived with my mum in my grand's house, along with my 2 brothers. We didn't have a lot, but we were very happy and loving. And I always remember that once a month, the man from the Prue would come around to our house, and he'd knock on the door and he'd come in and he would take, I'm never quite sure how much he took, but my gran would open a purse and she'd give him some cash, a few shillings, and off he'd go. And I remember we ended up living on my gran's pension, given that, as I say, my mum was divorced in those days, she was the one who was the breadwinner. With my gran. And I remember my grandmother saying to me, put a little bit aside all the time, even though you may not need it now, or you may begrudge doing it, because in time it'll work for you. And I remember that. And I remember we all worked in our little house, 2 up, 2 down household. I worked, my twin brother worked, my mum worked, my gran worked until she was in her mid-80s.
Really?
Yeah, she was.
What did she do?
Well, she was the forelady at a sewing factory, and she was in charge of all the other, and it was mainly ladies who were making shirts, in inner city Manchester, and she loved it, and she was highly loved and respected. But she always worked, so we knew, and we were taught, if you like, the value of money. It's hard to make, and it's harder to keep. Put a little bit aside.
And so a really strong work ethic there throughout, so it kind of runs as DNA, and that importance of long-term saving right from the get-go.
In a way, yes. And I always remember, no matter what I do, I've got to try and put a little bit aside. Partly it's understanding how to do that, because there is no man from the Prue around anymore.
And for listeners who are thinking, I'm not sure, how would you describe the man from the Prue? What was his job? What did he do?
Well, basically, he went round door to door, collected money, which they invested for a pension. So long-term savings, basically, that you couldn't touch until you needed it when you got older. And then it helped you in hard times, and when the money wasn't coming in. And so I certainly at the time, I knew none of the mechanics behind it or what it was being invested in or how it was being invested. I just learned the habit that you put a little bit aside.
And in what ways do you think those early influences are stuck with you regarding your emotional relationship with money now?
I suppose growing up never having much money is two things. One is you do value it because you see a lot of people that don't have it. We didn't have it. And secondly, there was not fear, but a sense of apprehension about, well, what if it wasn't there? What would we have done if it wasn't for my grand's pension during those days? Because back then in the 1970s in Britain, we had inflation of 28%.
Absolutely.
We had 3-day weeks, a lot of the country unemployed, including my mum, and so really I thought, gosh, if that wasn't the case, what would we have done? So you grow up having a sense of realizing the value of money, and also a little bit of a sense of apprehension about if you didn't have any. And that's probably unnatural now at my point in my life, but you carry it with you in your DNA. Well,
that's right. Even though your needs change, your mindset very often doesn't, does it? So
exactly. And people say to me, well, when will you retire, Paul? And I can't see I'll ever retire, because
is that the entrepreneur in you, do you think?
I think it's the Quaker in me. My mum
right.
were Quakers, and my father's side were Catholic. So it's been a case of, work hard, oh, leave them alone, work hard, leave them alone. So I'm a little bit schizophrenic.
Yeah, kind of brake, accelerator. Yeah.
Exactly.
You clearly were building for the future and understood the importance of building from the future early on. I know that you've taken that into Quilter. Quilter Foundation are very passionate about finding ways to support young people to succeed through both financial literacy and employability skills as part of your shared prosperity plan. Now, I know as Chief Executive of Quilter and also Chair of the Foundation, this is really important to you. Could you tell us a little bit more about why it is and what impact you're aiming to create?
It is really important to me. So at Quilter, we've been spending years on our purpose, which is to create prosperity for the generations of today and tomorrow. And the purpose of the foundation, which I'm very privileged to chair, is kind of the flip side of that coin. It's to help remove the barriers to prosperity for young people in our society. And some of those barriers are around education. And because I think of myself, and some of those barriers are around education, just like helping young people to understand and realize their potential, really. And around financial education, it sounds like a huge term, but it's an area where a little knowledge can go a long way. You don't need to know all about compounding interest rates and, capital markets theory and all that stuff. You just need to have sufficient knowledge, and it can make a big difference, because I know that doing that, there's two ways you can earn money. One is to work really hard, and you should do that anyway. And the other one is to help your money earn the money for you.
And I love that. I love that about you. Why we believe there's a real potential here to change the narrative around financial education, to show it more as an enabler of opportunity, help you get on in life. You term it as prosperity, which is absolutely where we're heading it, rather than solely as a means of preventing exploitation or reducing debt. How do you think that financial organisations like Quilter can contribute to bringing about that change in narrative so that it's focused much more on helping you get on?
Well, I think, first of all, big corporations like ourselves have to first of all understand that after the last 10 years we've been through, and certainly the last 2 years with COVID and everything, if the company is all about just making profit, that company won't last very long. Who cares? Who wants to work for a company that just wants to make profit? Yeah, you want to work for. We get out of bed for a purpose. Certainly, I get out of bed for a purpose. I want to work for, build, help lead a company that has got a bigger purpose. And if we've learned nothing over the last few years, is that that's what really matters. And by the way, if you do that, guess what? You'll make profit too, because you'll attract people. People see and can see through shallow companies and marketing campaigns and all the rest. So work for a business that has a proper purpose. And that is all about making a difference to people, and people in our country, making a difference. And that's what I want to do. And that's why we set up the foundation. It's why we work with Young Enterprise. It's why we work with My Bank and various other charities, Young Carers we've done a lot with around the country, so that we can help make a difference. And it's just good business. It's not even philanthropy. It's good business, because you attract like-minded people who want to make a difference, and they'll put their heart and soul into it. And by the way, our clients, nearly 1 million clients now that we've got in Quilter, they all want to make a difference too. Some of them don't always know how to, but they want to make a difference. And if you can help harness that, then you can make a difference to your own society, but you can also make a big difference to your country. You can make a difference to yourself. I feel better about it every day when I get out of bed.
So taking you back to that young boy in Manchester who was so focused on building a future and understood the importance of money in building a future, how do we flick the switch of financial education more towards how it can be an enabler and a prosperity maker, really, from your perspective?
I think, first of all, big companies like ourselves have a duty to do that. We have to be about more than profit. And nobody wants to work for a company that's just about profit. And by the way, the young people listening to this, if you go for an interview and the company tells you about all the profit they're making, walk away, go somewhere else. Because good companies these days realize they have to contribute to society. And we certainly realize that at Quilter. That's the first thing. Have a higher purpose, because that's what gets us out of bed. And ultimately, I think what money does, it's an enabler. Money doesn't make you happy. I'm 58 years of age, and I can tell you, money doesn't make you happy, but it enables you to do things that can make you happy. And one of the things it enables you to do is give that money away, because ultimately you only ever get to keep what you give away.
I love that. Just tell me that again.
Ultimately, you only ever get to keep what you give away. And it's what fulfills us. It's what fulfills us as human beings, helping our fellow man, our fellow woman, our fellow person. It fulfills us. And if you have money, you can do that. And that's why we set up the Quilter Foundation, so that we can make a difference and help. And we think about it carefully, but it's why we work with Young Enterprise and My Bank and Young Carers and the like, because we can make a difference. I can tell you, every one of us who does that gains so much from it. You just feel more fulfilled.
That passion that you have, that humanity that you have, that also kind of moves across. I've watched a number of your podcasts about you promoting good mental health, both in your role at Quilter and more generally across your industry. And at this point, I really would like to just commend you, really, because your bravery and your honesty in publicly sharing your own mental health journey, I just found that hugely inspirational. But what, if any, role do you think that financial education has to play in supporting good mental health?
Oh, I think there's a huge link between mental health and financial health. A huge link. I mean, at the root cause of most mental health issues is stress and anxiety. It's at the root cause. It doesn't always end up as the main cause, but it's at the root cause of a lot of mental health issues. And the fear of running out of money, of not being able to pay the gas bill, of being evicted, of not, wondering how you're going to clothe your kids. I've been through all this. Many people, it causes tremendous mental strain. So being able to understand a little bit more about finance, about just money, and what you can do, and know that even though you may be going through tough times, your money is there still working for you. And it can really help understanding how to deal with debt, understanding how to balance a monthly budget. We're not talking about, Rockefeller hedge fund stuff and all that. We're talking about some key financial understanding that can really take pressure off, because there is a huge link between financial stress and mental stress.
And Thrive is your employee wellbeing initiative, which I know you sponsor. So that supports people with their mental, physical, social, financial wellbeing. So clearly, Quilter feel there's a link between those areas. At YE, we also feel that young people would benefit from this holistic approach to life skills, particularly in school. What benefits have you found to your business of taking this holistic approach to supporting colleagues?
People feeling healthier, happier, lower sickness levels.
Really?
And just basically people feeling happier about the workplace, because one of the things we don't do is we don't talk and open up about it. That's why I opened up about my mental health issues that I've had down the years. I was silent about it for many, many years. It was almost a shame, something you didn't talk about. Eventually, the pain gets more than the potential, what I felt, embarrassment about it. I thought, if I'm going to do anything, why am I not talking about it? So I did. And when I opened up about it, I did a video called This Is Me.
I've seen it.
And it just gave everyone permission to say, hey, it's okay not to be okay. Because a lot of the time, we're not always okay. And once you start talking about it, you can then start talking about why. And some people, it could be for some people that it's just because they have got financial issues or financial difficulties. So that's when we then put in counseling sessions and advice sessions for our staff, so that they could get advice, free advice on what to do about it. And once people realize it's not just them, because sometimes worry, whether it's about debt or finance or anything, it can be a suffocating place. It's basically a room you go into that gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Yeah. So you have to open the door to that room, and you have to be able to walk out of that room. And once you realize that there's so many other people who are occupying similar rooms, we can all walk out and talk to each other. And then say, okay, we need help. The ability to put your hand up, particularly as a young person, and say, I need some help, is a big, big thing.
Well, you've certainly led by example in sharing your personal journey, and also for your sector as well, which traditionally isn't a place, is it, where people are open about their mental health issues. So again, it's a real massive testament to you, really. There's very little out there in terms of research linking financial capability with social mobility and that opportunity to get on in life, regardless of your starting point. At Young Enterprise, we believe there is a link to explore. What are your views on the contribution that financial capability can make to social mobility, if indeed you think there are any?
Oh, definitely. And I'm a case in point. I mean, as I say, I grew up hugely incredible mum and grandmother. But, a 2 up, 2 down terrace house, North Manchester. Myself and my 2 brothers slept in one bedroom in one bed. And my mum and gran slept in the other bed. Quite frankly, they starting to get an appreciation for, first of all, self-worth. And my mum, that came from my mum very much. She'd always say, boys, we're here because of our circumstances, not our capabilities. You believe that when you're that young, and and it's proven to be true. But then secondly, seeking out and saying, right, I'm going to learn something about this, not huge amount, but just enough. And then realizing, okay, if you can learn a certain amount about that, then it gives you an ability to move, and it just gives you a bit more confidence, I think, is the honest answer at that age. Not that you could honestly say, certainly when I was 18 years of age, that I knew really anything about finance. I didn't know that much, but I knew a little bit enough to know that, money may not make the world go round, but it does keep it spinning.
And you're right. You're so right, because that confidence to ask questions about money is key, isn't it? Yeah,
the confidence to ask questions about it. And then to take some risk. Yeah. Everyone in life says, oh, be careful about the risk. Don't take risks. No, take risks. Okay. We are all in life in the business of reasonable risks. And the trick is to know what is a reasonable risk.
So how did you learn that? How did you learn that?
Well, you make mistakes. you make some mistakes. You do some things right, and you start. You start assessing, but you've got to start. And I think one of the first things is to start. You can't think your way to a different future. You have to act your way to a different future. And the problem about acting, i.e. behaving your way to a different future, is you can be wrong. Yeah. Whereas if you just try and think your way, well, nobody really knows whether you're wrong or not. It's only inside your head, But if you act, then you're going to make mistakes. But that's what learning's all about. So start small, but do something.
Was there a sliding door moment where you began to think, actually, the ability to take risk is a good thing? Is there any particular memories of times you had done that early on where it had paid off and made you think about that?
Yeah, just even little things like my brother and I, we had some records. We didn't have much, but then we went to secondhand record shops and bought records for a penny. Then we'd sell them. But then we'd use all the money we had, which wasn't very much. And then we'd sell them, but we'd sell them for more. And then, wow, that worked. Yeah. Then more records, and then we sold them for more. Then we thought, wow, forget records, let's do tape recorders. So we bought tape recorders and we sold them for less. And then all the record money went down there. So it worked with the records, but it didn't work with the tape recorders. And then you start, you have to start trying, acting. So, you make money out of one. We could have just said, well, that's it, we'll keep that and spend it. But we invested it in a way, although we didn't really know we were doing that at the time, into something else. That didn't go so well.
We asked some young people what questions they might like to ask our podcast guests. And I have one here for you, which I might share if I may. What are your top tips for saving? That's from a young person. What are your top tips for saving?
My first top tip for saving is to start, because so few people do it. They research or think about it, but they don't actually start. Okay. Now there's two ways you can save. One is in a bank account, and if you look at the Bank of England today, I've just raised interest rates to 0.25%, a quarter of 1%. So in other words, if you put £100 in, by the end of the year, they will give you £100 and 25 pence back. Not very much, that, is it?
No, no.
A long time saving on that one. So another way to save is in the markets. The best way to do that, if you are an adult, is probably an ISA, individual savings, an equity ISA. If you're under the age of 18, you can be a junior ISA. Okay, but you can invest in the stock market just by what I'd call a index fund, a tracker fund. You can go onto most platforms and buy that. Or ask around. You can just put. Most of them will start at £500 or something if you can do it. But if you can get, that's still a lot of money for a young person. Either way, the first thing is to start. And even if you can't afford £500, put £5 in a bank account, and then the next month put another £5 in. And when you've got £100, then buy the
right.
ISA.
So something regular, even if it's small, but take that action.
Let's start. Yeah.
Paul, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. Thank you for your incredible work to shine a light on the importance of employers investing in employees' mental health, and the brilliant work that you're doing to build young people's financial capability with my bank and with the Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us on Minding Your Money.
You're very welcome, Chan. Delighted to have been here. Thank you.
To hear more interviews like the one with Paul and access Series 1 and 2, please do subscribe to Enterprising Mindsets on your favourite podcast service. We'd love you to leave a review as well, if possible. Thank you for listening.